Hello and welcome to the Bible Through the Year as we continue on in our readings together, and we come to this book of Hosea. Hosea is one of these really interesting books. I remember doing a series on it in our previous church, and we did an evening service series on it. I said I really want to do a series on Hosea, because there's some wonderful, almost unparalleled language in Hosea that talks about God's relationship with his people. And we did this series, it's like 10 weeks or something like that. And there are some really tough bits to read in Hosea as well. So you've got a mixed bag coming up in the coming days, really, because there's a lot of, to set the context, right at the beginning of Hosea, God says to Hosea, who's a prophet, I want you to go and marry a promiscuous woman, a woman who kind of sleeps around, who has affairs. I want you to marry her, and because that's going to give you a picture of what I feel like when my people are unfaithful, when they go off and turn their back on me, when they go off and worship other things or other gods, what that feels like to me. I want you to know what that feels like. So he marries Gomer, and they have kids, and I remember spending a lot of time, obviously with Bex, thinking about what we were going to call Leo, and going for walks along the canal where we just talk about names and look names up, and in the end we have these wonderful names for our son Leo, and but the names that God asks Hosea to call his children are a difficult read. You've got one who's named after the place where God is going to kind of destroy his people Israel. You've got one name that means not loved, one name which means not my people. So you can tell that God is hurt. This is the thing we kind of miss sometimes with God, that God is a God of emotion, a God of feeling. And here he is in this part of the scriptures where he's hurt. He's the jilted partner of an unfaithful spouse who keeps turning their back on him. And Gomer kind of reflects that in chapter 2. Gomer is unfaithful to Hosea, goes off, and Hosea has to go and redeem her, literally redeem her at a slave market, and for 30 pieces of silver, so half of it paid in silver, half of it paid in barley, but the worth of that about the same. 30 pieces of silver, the price of redemption. Ring a bell for any of you? It's the price that Judas paid, was paid to betray Jesus. The price of and the worth of that cost. The redemption of God's people by God. The price that is paid, about half a year's wages. So a significant price that was paid to redeem this unfaithful lover. And that is married, isn't it, with the price that God pays. Not just the emotional price of loving us, but the price to redeem us, to buy us back, to win us back, to enter again into that loving covenant relationship. We see, as I said, some of the most wonderful language. You get to chapter 11, and there's a lot of in between in the build-ups, kind of from 3 onwards to up 11 and beyond. There is this language of God talking about his hurt and his pain and the list of wrongs that Israel has committed against him. And then we get to chapter 11, and we read this. It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I brought my son. And then he says, it was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them up in my arms. They did not realize it was I who healed them. I led them with the cords of human kindness, with ties of love. I was like to them the one who lifts a little child to the cheek and bends down and feeds them. What amazing language, what beautiful, tender language. God says, my heart is changed within me, my compassion is aroused. I will not carry out my fierce anger against them. And then, it's just this wonderful, wonderful, how can I give you up? How can I hand you over to someone else? So God's love is there in the background. God's hurt, yes, but his love is there, and his love is what triumphs. Mercy triumphs over judgment. This is the story. The story is meant to be a picture of God and his people. But as you think about what Gomer does to Hosea, and therefore what God's people does to God and how he feels about that, then you begin to see this is what we do. This is what we do to God. When we run off and go our own way, when we run off and do different things, when we pursue things that are not of God, when we worship idols and whatever that is, whether that's money, power, status, these kind of things, then we run away from God. We're kind of cheating on God and unfaithful to him, and this hurts him. It breaks his heart, and there is a cost to that redemption. That redemption is bought by God for us, that he comes to the slave market and he pays the price through the giving of his son to win us back. That this is the narrative of Scripture, really in a microcosm, relationally, in this book of Hosea. So there'll be some difficult reading, and do you know what it is meant to be? In the same way that when you read the narrative of Jesus on the cross, and that's meant to be painful reading, because you're like, this is the cost. Yes, it shows our worth and our value, but it's the cost of our unfaithfulness. And the same is true when we read Hosea. There are bits where we get insight into God's heart, God's journaling. This is what it feels like. And that's meant to be hard to read, because it's meant to show, yes, our worth, but it's also meant to show, the cost, what it's done, our brokenness of relationship, and how that needs to be dealt with, how we need to change, how we need to be faithful. So I pray that as we read this together, that you would be, touched tenderly by these wonderful words, but you might be challenged powerfully by the story and your faithfulness to God and the price that he is willing to pay to win you back. So may God bless you as you read it.